Okay. Well, tonight, guys, we have with us Reverend Guy Hewitt, and I must say that I asked Reverend Guy Hewitt to be a guest on the show. He's been on the show, I think, twice or three times before. And when I asked him to be a guest, I had not seen that article, that famous article that has been going all over Barbados. I'm not sure if he understands what has happened to that article. And there was an article that he wrote before that caught my attention. He was writing, used to write a lot before, but I actually asked him to be a guest this morning. I think it was about after 4 in the morning, and he doesn't know this. This was before I knew anything about the article. I knew about the article probably about 2 hours after I asked him. I had no idea. I got up and had my prayers, and I went on the phone and I saw he sent me a message, and I said, I would love for him to come on because I made mention of him on this program as we dealt with the crime and violence, the increase of the crime and violence in Barbados. But I didn't read the articles. After I read it, I'm like, oh my goodness, he wrote an article that's in the paper today. But let me just introduce him to you. Reverend Guy Hewitt, a priest. He's an author. He's a racial justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion advocate, and a specialist in social policy. He was a leading advocate and voice on the Windrush scandal. And he's a former High Commissioner, Barbados High Commissioner to the UK. Actually, that's where I met him. Let me welcome to one more time to the Marcia Weekes Show, Reverend Guy Hewitt. Welcome, sir.
Good evening, Marcia, fellow Barbadians and viewers everywhere. I'm thankful that Providence has brought us together, and allow me to begin by thanking Marcia for her intervention, and importantly, taking a moment to commend those who we've recently lost due to tragic passings. May they rest in peace.
Yes, sir. There are 28 of them, including an unborn child. Yeah. And this Sunday we are doing a little memorial for them. And someone says, well, they might have, who are they? They some of them might be criminals, whatever. What we're saying is it's a life that's lost, Reverend, and we are humanizing them. And they're not dogs, they're not cattle, they're not animals, they're people. And so we're going to have their names up, and we're going to say their names aloud. And this is all going to be at Hastings Rock on Sunday at 5:30. So I thank you for the way you started, sir.
And thank you again. And I want to share with those who may have not seen the article, really my views on crime and violence, speaking to what I consider to be a bargaining with the devil. And I think you may have some slides that I shared with you.
Do. Yes, we do. They're going to come up very soon. And as they come up, we're going to ask people to share share the broadcast as we get everything up on the screen. Welcome to everybody who's joined, and we ask you to share and let someone know that we are actually on. And I'm waiting for it to come up on the screen.
Okay.
I saw that they had the technical persons had it this evening working on. Yes, sir.
Well, if I can begin,
yes.
To say, trying to contextualize where we are. We have a challenge now in Barbados, and I would say elsewhere, with the absence of strong familial and community bonds. And as a consequence, our social fabric has been torn, and attempts have been made to patch it. But what it has really done is led to a cult of the individual. And when I speak about that, I'm talking about the pervasiveness of materialism, of hedonism, which is this fet and pie mentality, and the pursuit of self-gratification. Our challenge as a society is that we are no longer our brothers and sisters' keeper. And we see that in the failings in education, in healthcare, in other public services, and the eroding social mores that we have. And I would just say if they can jump to the next slide, please. And what we are losing is those things about hard work and integrity and protection of the old and the young and the vulnerable, and participating in team and community activities that reinforces important skills like conflict avoidance and respect and collaboration and patience and discipline. And in that context, we see, and if you can go to the next slide, the pillars of society starting to crumble. And I have to be honest in addressing the fact that pastors and politicians and police officers and others are no longer held in high esteem. They're no longer beyond reproach, and due in part to associations by some of them with illicit or immoral acts. And so people are now living by what some call the so-called 11th commandment, thou shalt not get caught. That's where we are as a society. And if we go to the next slide, combined with the failing education systems, high youth unemployment, escalating cost of living, it's easy for people, particularly our youth, to lose hope. And because the conditions in which some of these prospective gang recruits or for soldiers live, poverty, exclusion, marginality, and where life is precarious, both socially and financially, criminal gangs become their de facto point of reference, their go-to place, a place where they get a sense of belonging and identity. If you go to the next slide, I want to talk a bit about gang truces. And there was a famous gang truce that was brokered in 1992 in Los Angeles between two gangs, which many people know by name, possibly, and reputation, the Blood and the Crip Street gangs. This deal was brokered by people recognizing that they were now becoming victims of their own actions with the introduction of crack cocaine in the 80s and the guns that followed it. What were really hand-to-hand conflict turned into deadly gun battles. And the leaders came together and they enacted a peace treaty in April 1992, which became a hallmark for so many other truces that followed. And if you go to the next slide, and what we are seeing now, that was 30-something years ago, that gang truces are again in vogue. And they're capturing political and media attention all over the Caribbean, Central America, even in inner cities in the UK and the US, because of this serious concern with the escalation of violence. And the challenge with it is that the evidence of their accomplishments is surprisingly thin. Generally, truces come about because of negotiations by key people within those communities. You get NGOs, charity workers, community leaders, faith-based groups, and sometimes even active or ex-gang members, as happened in Watts in Los Angeles. And the benefit of these actions is securing that reduction in homicide. But this is where I have come into this debate when it comes to Barbados. And if we can go to the next slide, is when a government gets involved in these things, what is the cost? And that's the problem. There is a cost which I attribute to trying to do a deal with the devil. And I want to put this in the context of a social contract and give people a bit of background within which we are operating, or within which we as citizens engage our governments. If we go to the next slide, in political philosophy, there is this notion of a social contract that we as citizens and the governments agree upon in order to avoid what Thomas Hobbes calls the precariousness of life in a state of nature, which he said is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. And if we go to the next slide, there, after him, John Locke came up with this notion of civil government, which provides goods and services, that protects our rights as individuals, the right to safety, to private property, to law and order, and that the government in turn ensures our individual well-being, regulates markets, maintains social cohesion, and a lot of this negotiated through our payment of taxes. And it is within that context of trying to ensure public safety, maintaining law and order, that this questionable acts by governments of getting involved in brokering deals with members of gangs and the criminal underworld towards securing a truce or peace negotiations becomes highly, highly suspect and very reckless and dangerous. And if we go to the next slide, we've got a problem because government's involvement in such truces can incentivize criminal gangs in return for the political support they give, and it can also enhance their ability to pursue their criminal enterprises. While we may see in the short term a decrease in homicides, there is little indication that the other criminal activities decrease as well. And in many instances, especially in the case of drug trafficking, that is connected directly with the movement of firearms, these activities can proceed without interruption. And there's a dangerous message that is sent to gangs and other criminal actors that governments can be held hostage when it comes to their use of violence. And these agreements, these negotiations can legitimize gangs, reinforce the authority of underworld leaders, deepening cohesion amongst their rank and file, reproducing the very systems that create the violence to start with. And if we go to the next slide, and evidence from across the region indicates that in an effort to stem gun violence, taxpayers' money is used to finance drug members and gang members through peace initiatives. And this is tantamount to the familiar moral hazard of negotiating with terrorists. That's my position on it. And commingling the state and criminality erodes public confidence and trust in government, and often it fails to provide justice to those victims. So that unlike truces, there are other things that can be done to build medium and long-term violence prevention programs that also lead to a reduction in homicides. But these are less popular because they are more involved and they take longer. Next slide. But in the best case scenario, gang truces can help end violent conflict and create a necessary space for bringing about structural change that can lead to the de-escalation of criminality. However, that is not the purview of governments. The government is supposed to provide the enabling conditions that bring about the movement and betterment of society, not to be doing deals, as I say, with the devil. And the problem is by being focused on the wrong things without the structural changes, the changes in health, education, community development, youth programs, and the like, we can easily slide back into the violence as we have seen recently. So crucially, it is important for us, if we want to address crime and violence in our society, is to offer a future and offer hope to our young people, to their families and their communities. And at the same time, we have to be tough on crime, holding leaders accountable, putting them in prisons rather than inviting them to Parliament. And the next slide I want to talk about is this questionable legality of governments doing deals with criminals. A lot of people will not know this, and the images of the former El Salvador president, Marcia Funes. Last year, he was sentenced to 14 years in prison for negotiating with gangs during his administration. The problem was severe, but out of desperation, the Salvadoran government negotiated with gangs in the early 2010s. A truce was enacted between government and these gangs, and then it collapsed. And what the prosecutors accused the president, then President Funes, of is the illicit association and failure to perform his duties rather than to negotiate with the gangs. And they said that the prosecutors basically said that what he did was to pervert government law and order by giving benefits to known criminals in exchange for them not to commit crimes. Sometimes it is not the easy option. And if we go to the next slide, some people argue that politics has its own morality and that a political leader must sometimes do wrong to do right. I don't subscribe to the inevitability of dirty hands, but rather to the adage, when you lie down with dogs, you get up with fleas. When I was working in London, at that time, Jacob Zuma was the president of South Africa. He was a man of highly questionable character. And at that time, I remember Desmond Tutu issuing a rebuke to him, which I think is very telling. And Desmond Tutu said to the South African president, Mr. Zuma, and I quote, "I am warning you out of love. You are behaving in a way that is totally at variance with the things for which we stood. I'm warning you that we will pray as we prayed for the downfall of apartheid government. We'll pray for the downfall of a government that misrepresents us. You have a huge majority. That's nothing. The nationalists had a huge majority that was increasing, but they bit the dust. Watch out, ANC government. Watch out, watch out, watch out." If we go to the last slide, I simply want to say thank you for giving me this time to interact with you. May God bless you all, and I look forward to us now having a conversation on this most pertinent topic.
Wow, quite intriguing. It's one thing to read the article, Reverend, and then now to see the pictures and the images with it, and it's quite interesting because I learned so much in that article. I did not realize that the former president Funes was sentenced to 14 years. Because the prosecutor said that he gave benefits to some of these gang leaders. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Well, the point they make is the government, no matter what its intentions are, does not have the authority to break the law. And so what he was doing and his administration was doing by doing deals with criminals, moving them out of prison, giving them access to phones and other things, allowing their criminal enterprises to continue, they were perverting the course of justice. And this is important for all governments to be reminded of. No one is above the law.
Yes. Now, there's something you said there about their enterprises, allowing their enterprises to flourish. I was speaking with an ex-gang leader, and he said to me, I was the first person who said it to me. He said to me, Marcia, with these kinds of the kind of truce that we're doing and the peace treaty and so on, he says all that is going to happen is that the drug trade is going to flourish, because when the monies that they've received from the government entity, all that is going to happen, they're business people, they're going to put it in their business, and so you're going to see that their drug business, those that have a drug business and a gun business where guns are brought into the country, that those businesses are going to flourish. Is that what you're speaking of?
So this is the point, Marcia. You're correct. That what happens, and we have to recognize this, the suppliers of drugs normally will supply guns alongside them. Now guns have developed its own social statement, regrettably, and I use that word, that I misuse that word because it is awfully and disgracefully, but it has a social status. So there is a demand for these weapons as bragging rights and to show how tough you are. And again, if we are trying to say or people say to people, you need to reduce the killing, what is offered in exchange? Is it that policing is dialed back? Is it that we say to them, there are some things that we will permit, but once you don't kill anybody, it becomes acceptable? I have listened to a number of members of the police force speak to the fact that known criminals are given legitimacy now in a way they have never had in the past. And this is where this nexus, as we have seen in Jamaica, as we have seen in Trinidad, as is happening all over the Caribbean, becomes dangerous, because in the exchange for votes and political support, you are putting the entire country at risk, and you are making each and every citizen, mothers, parents, children, the elderly, the vulnerable, at risk of criminal attack and at risk of losing their life.
I want to ask our those who are watching, if you have a question for the Reverend, to go ahead and to put it on. I know it's late for him, and we had this discussion. He says, I'm not a young man anymore. I need to get to bed because it's very late there in the UK. But if you have questions, just quickly put it in the chat. But, I have you here, and I want to ask you something. You said that the police in some instances, in some countries, the police is dialed back. And I notice, as someone born in Jamaica, I was saying, I don't feel the presence of the police in Barbados. And as you were speaking, I'm serious. I mean, I didn't make the connection. It is I'm wondering if that might be part of the challenge. Is it that they don't feel empowered to do what they have to do? Could it be because we don't, that I want to hear your thoughts about, because I living here, Rev, I just don't feel that the presence with so many guns on the streets, it doesn't, you're not feeling the presence of the police.
Marcia, when I considered direct involvement in politics in Barbados a few years ago, it was this very issue that brought me into it. There was an incident that took place in Deacons on Good Friday that showed to me that we need to be much tougher on crime, and people known to the police and to ensure that the message is never conveyed that anyone who is even considered to be involved in illicit activities could ever feel or project to the community that they have more power and authority than the police force. And I recall that incident in Deacons, where young children, I remember reading the article where young children were jeering at the police who left a scene where COVID laws were being broken and no one seemed able to enforce them. And that when again, as I speak to, as we remember the swearing in at the opening of parliaments years ago, was for me a tipping point where we and I am not going to make this partisan, where those activities that may have happened between all kinds of politicians and the criminal underworld have been given a level of legitimacy that I believe has emboldened them and has allowed them to feel that law enforcement and the security forces no longer have control over what happens in our communities.
Yeah, I remember, Reverend, and that is the way we got connected, because that was one of the major things that had me started to speak out. When I saw what happened at Deacons, I right away called my family in Jamaica. I said something terrible has happened in Barbados, and I remember telling my mom, and she's like, "What? You mean that actually happened there?" And I said, yes. And she said, send me the article. She didn't believe. She probably thought I was making it up. Mm-hmm. And I remember you and I had that conversation because I was completely shocked. And I was wondering if Barbadians understood that we are going to live to see a day like today.
Exactly. In that instance, we crossed over the Rubicon beyond the point of no return. But I believe and I have faith in the people of Barbados. I have faith in God. I have faith that with the right moral leadership, we can recover the lost ground that has taken place in Barbados, and we can put our country on the right moral footing and in a direction that does not just secure our future, but the future of our children and our children's children. We cannot be for any leaders to be short-termist in our interventions. We have got to look down the long road and understand that we are investing in this not just for ourselves, but for future generations to come.
You know, well said, Reverend Hewitt. You said something as well. And I was speaking with Lumumba, and you sounded like you understand what happened on the streets, Reverend. And let me just use this opportunity. You know, we come on sometimes and we really quarrel with the church for not stepping up. And here it is. You have a reverend who has done research and is bringing that research to Barbados and really, really, really enlightening us. And we must commend him for this kind of work. This is the kind of Christianity that I personally respect, being salt and light.
But Marcia, in fairness to my colleagues and my fellow clerics, one of the things that I am advantaged by is the fact that I have had, as I said, training in political sociology. I had a deliberate interest, or I had an interest and deliberately sought to ask the question, how do we relate the individual to society or polity? And that's not something that a lot of my colleagues have had. And I always say that important training for people in ministry is sociology, to understand society, psychology, to understand those who we have to guide, and some management and leadership skills, because they don't necessarily come naturally. And I had the opportunity to cultivate them, and I am pleased that I have been able to put them to use in this context, but in the work that I have done when I represented Barbados in the UK previously and fought for Barbadian and other West Indians here, and can still use it in terms of reconciling church and society, religion and everyday life.
Yes, yeah. I mean, and you've done a brilliant job at that. We miss your articles. We need some more of those. But you said something, sir, that says to me, man, you got to you understand the streets, because Lumumba was showing something to me and the ex-gang leader, and they said to me, Marcia, one of the reasons that you're seeing the increase in the guns is that they believe, it's what they're alleging, that the monies that a lot of these some of these persons known to the law are getting through the peace program, that they're using it to, as I said earlier, to expand the drug trade. And in expanding the drug trade, this is what both of them said to me. Lumumba used to be on the streets and Zika John used to be on the streets. And they both said what you said tonight. They said that because they believe that the peace program is what is causing all of these guns on the streets, because they now have they have a reason, to get the guns. They have to protect their drug trade. So that is quite interesting.
And part of it, and this is what I said, and I use that principle: we must not negotiate with terrorists. And I know these bloc leaders are Bajans, they are our people, they are our brothers and our sisters. But the society, importantly, the state, must draw a very clear line between what is moral and ethical and legal and what is illicit and immoral and impermissible. And that now has become very blurred. And this is part of the problem, because what you are really saying, and when we talk about these peace initiatives, the peace initiatives, as you are speaking to, if it is that resources are going directly into known perpetrators of crime, that is immensely problematic from ethically and legally. But more importantly, it must be tremendously demoralizing for members of the police force, to think that they are being paid to uphold, to protect and serve and reassure, and at the same time, people who are undermining, frightening, and destabilizing are drawing current money from the same treasury at the end of the month. That, to me, is irreconcilable and must do immense damage to the psyche and the well-being of those who are tasked to uphold the law and order.
Mm. I'm waiting. I don't see anybody. People, I guess you're all listening very keenly to what you're saying. There are no questions. But, I realized that the Prime Minister in the most recent press conference or that was held, or a statement to the newspaper, she proposed a football match, which I think it's a good idea, because it is dealing with some of the social, providing some of the social answers that are needed for some of the issues that we have. The Prime Minister's Cup, it's called, there's I think $150,000 that they're buying for, and she's going to do some workshops, and we must commend her on that, because as you said in your article, those are some of the things that are needed. Albeit it's going to take a longer time to be able to get to where you want to go. But there's also a comment in the newspaper that she said that the heart of the problem is the cell phone. Now, when I hear if I say the heart of the problem, I'm understanding that the main reason, right, the what keeps it alive is the cell phone. And I wanted to hear your thoughts about that, and about also the football match and so on. What are your thoughts about what the Prime Minister has proposed at this time?
I want to say, or reiterate, as I said earlier, the importance of community engagement. Teams and sporting activities are immensely powerful to build important life skills. As I mentioned earlier, conflict avoidance, respect, collaboration, discipline, all of them. But this again is working towards populism. This is a short-term fix to say, let's bring some footballers together and using that same fete and macaroni pie analogy to make people feel good for a short period of time, instant gratification yet again. If we were saying we are going to invest in a football program through all of the primary schools and the secondary schools and build it up like that, I would say I can see the long-term value. But this is going to, as I say, help with short-term community mobilizing. But what is the legacy value of it is something that I feel people have a right to ask, and there needs to be some more strategic thinking in terms of these interventions. But on the issue of the phones, the technology is a reality of life and living now. And for all of us, and I had the misfortune of losing a phone a couple months ago, and know and appreciate the sense of dislocation because of how much of our work, our business, our interaction is done through smartphones. But the challenge is that what people thought was that digital communications and smartphones and social media were going to somehow be the solution to issues of democratic accountability and engagement, and has not turned out to be so, because what we have seen it do is pervert particularly young people, our young females as well, with all kinds of self-image issues, all kinds of issues of bullying and abuse, real issues of addiction and being over-consumed by it. And this also happens, I would have to say, with adults as well. But what it has also done is, again, pushed us, as we look at these wonderful images of these people all over the world, fabulous people doing fabulous things, again, driving us towards instant gratification, wanting to live a hedonistic life of pleasure and joy, when in truth, our democracy and our lifestyle demands that we get accustomed to disappointment and dissatisfaction in many things in life, and having patience in working towards what we want. And partially because of the way in which images and messaging are communicated through these phones and these devices, what it also does, I believe, is it has distorted our politics. And I'm not talking about just in Barbados, I'm talking about globally, the way in which messaging sends inauthentic communications and messages around about the democratic process, around leadership, and makes and reduces it, I think, reduces it to things that are about sound bites and about populism, about what you could get on Twitter or Meta or TikTok, rather than asking people to delve into the deep issues and find lasting solutions. So that what we want to do is, have a football competition, get a peace initiative, things that read well in the headlines, but when you get into the substance of them, they don't help the society move forward. They don't build people up. Rather, they just keep us running at a bare minimum, ethically and morally, and not asking us to ask the questions, what is in our interest and what are we called to do something for ourselves, our children, our families, for our nation that serves the common good.
Mm. So you believe that, and I agree with you. Quick fixes, just to say that we did something or we said something, or but these are not policies that are going to go to the foundation of what the issue is. As you said, back to the primary school, and start there. Um, Everton Hunt is asking, do you believe that adding another unit to the police service will bring any results? Because I know right now they have a special unit already in the police department, actually. Don't you think we need preventative intervention much earlier? What are your thoughts? I don't know if you've been following all of
You
what.
know, I listen. I would say this: Barbados is a small society, and I could say that as a nation, we are particularly inquisitive and use the Bayesian term malicious. Okay. Every community knows who has guns, who is selling drugs. The
Mm,
problem is they do not have confidence in the system. As I said, the commingling of the state and criminal activities has meant that people can no longer with confidence say, I am going to report this, and I know that it will not come back to affect me. Being our sisters and brothers keeper, looking out for the public good and community well-being, some people will start to feel is detrimental because they are seeing or perceiving that known criminals are associated with people in positions of authority, whether it is to enact laws or to enforce them in the communities. And until we make it
mm,
abundantly clear that there should not be and will not be any perversion of the public sector by criminal groups. And I'm not being naive here because I appreciate that it's impossible to eradicate all crime or all corruption. But until we send a clear signal that this is not tolerated and that we are willing to work as a country with all of our community members in it, we are not going to get that level of cooperation. So yes, the question, the more police will always work to the benefit of law and order. But the thing about it is, as I said, if they don't feel that they have the necessary authority to interdict and criminals and act on in known situations where there are criminal activities or drug-related activities or gang-related activities, if there is a concern that there may be political cover or political nexus, that's going to undermine them as it could undermine a community. So whoever is in government, whoever is committed to helping Barbados go forward has to have the conviction to stand on a firm moral ground and say, enough is enough. Barbados has lost or is losing the plot. We have to recover the streets. We have to recover our communities. We have to get rid of the guns and make it not just a police priority or a priority of the relevant government departments, but make it a national priority and ask all hands to be on deck.
yeah, yeah. As somebody says there, if my hands tied, 100 units make no difference. If they feel like they're not empowered to do what they have to do. Reverend, is there any country that you could use as an example that would have done the foundational work then, the long term work? Put the right policies, foundational policies in place, and they're seeing, in your estimation, they're seeing a change in the criminal activity within their country. Is there an example that you want to share with us?
I would say that when you look across the world, in a lot of the cases, it's developing societies. If you look across in Scandinavian countries, there's a lot of work that has been invested in maintaining social cohesion. But as we know, in Europe, they are now trying to reconcile themselves to becoming a much more diverse society with the recent migration shifts that have occurred in Europe. And we are seeing how that has playing itself out politically, and it is destabilizing. But one of the places that I had the joy of visiting, and Barbados has always spoken about, especially our late father, Errol Barrow, is the work that was done and continues to be done in Singapore. That you had a long-term vision of development, a long-term commitment to the welfare and well-being of people that has translated into a high standard of living and a zero tolerance for certain types of crime and criminality. And I think that's one of the things that we have to get to, where we accept that we have to draw this line and have a zero tolerance approach for certain activities, certain crimes, in the society. And as we are seeing now, the proliferation, not just of handguns, but automatic rifles and machine guns, there must be a commitment, an all-out commitment, not to just tell people not to fire them, but to eradicate them, because it is a serious social threat.
Yes, it really is. Somebody told me about Glasgow, Scotland, where they've implemented a lot of bereavement therapy, because a lot of times, like, we now just had these 8 persons dying in a week. They are connected to families and friends, and there's a lot of sadness that a lot of times people there's no bereavement for them, because people say, oh, it's like they're animals, and that breeds a lot of revenge and hurt and anger and lots of so someone told me that in Glasgow, in Scotland, that they offer bereavement therapy, peer-to-peer connection, fun spaces for children. There are a lot of social workers, they are at their disposal in those communities. Lots of sports club trauma counselors, which is very important as well. So it's as you said in your article, it's more comprehensive than just deciding to put $150,000. It's almost like you're throwing corn out there and just throw it, and seeing what happens.
And I would say, Marcia, I'm beyond responding to the individual families and wider community of those who've lost their life, that this is something that we should be mourning as a nation. This is not just confined to those communities or those families.
Why? I want you to stress. I'm pausing. I'm stopping you, because, and I want to say something to everybody, almost 900 of you watching. I want to say something to you, and I want you to listen to the Reverend, because there are people who believe that the event that we're having on Sunday, where we're highlighting those 28 persons who have died, some people believe that it's nonsense, because some of them might have been involved in criminality, and we see it, the organizers see it as a time of mourning, when the nation should mourn. So I want us to listen keenly to the Reverend tonight. Go ahead, Reverend.
Sorry, Marcia. I hope I can meet your expectation. But my reflection on this is that what we are seeing, as I started my discussion with, our social fabric is being torn apart. And those 28 lives are 28 strands of Barbados and Barbadiana that have been untimely and unnecessarily cut out of our picture of our social fabric, and what we need to mourn their loss. But importantly as well, we need to recognize, until we allow it to affect and touch each and every one of us, we are unlikely to become actors and agents in the change process that needs to take place. It can't be, or we must realize now that it cannot be left to any political party of any partisan persuasion to fix the problems we have in Barbados. All administrations recently have shown that they have been incapable. We need a new type of leadership, a new type of morality, a new type of being as citizens that say that it cannot be just for what we get out of it and what somebody is going to give us in terms of a contract or in terms of preference or a few tickets or a football or whatever, but that we are going to invest in recapturing the country that is being surrendered to crime and violence all around. So mourning those lost lives is symbolic of the pain and the suffering that all of us should feel, and more importantly, are likely to feel if we don't all take responsibility for being our brothers and sisters keeper and recovering what has been lost in this country through immorality and unethical practice.
Wow. I mean, you have just validated what we're seeking to achieve. Reverend, on this show, I started to put up the pictures of those that lost their lives, because actually some of it was happening real time as we were having the show, and I would put up their pictures, and there were people who felt that, no, take down the picture, it is too much to look at, and so on. And I did it deliberately, Reverend, because I wanted people to feel it, to touch, to be touched by it, because I know, Reverend, that's the only way that it's going to change. If we're detached from it, then we're not going to do anything. But we have to see their pictures. And look, I told them, don't quickly move across it when it comes to you on social media. Stay there and study that picture. Look at the face. It's a person. And this is why I really, really, I really respect the work that you do. So, and I honor you, really.
Marcia, thank you. And I want to make this point, which if it doesn't speak to the notion of being our brothers and sisters keeper, let self-interest prevail then, to realize that in Barbados, there is no lines of demarcation between the heights and the terraces and the blocks. That as easily as something can happen in Ford's Road or anywhere, it can happen in the heights and the terraces. So that the loss of life that we mourn for people that we don't know could easily be for those our loved ones. And so we need to understand that this is an endemic problem in Barbados that all of us need to see, not just as a public good, but for our individual safety and security.
Excellent, sir. The last question, and my next guest is on, so I'm going to get him on very soon, Mr. Paul Messiah, who did a fabulous, post today, wrote from his heart, and again, it went viral. So did your article, sir. But there's a question here, and this is our last question for the night. Reverend Hewitt from Niger Newton, do you think Barbadians can resolve the issue of crime without radical change in the system of governance?
Yes, it's not about the system of governance that we have to change. It is the mindset of those who govern us. We have to expect a new type and quality of leader in this country, and not just political leaders, but those who are leading our public administration as well. They must have both the competence and the integrity to do what we as taxpayers commissioned them to do. It is a social contract between we, the governed, and they who are governing us. They must prove that they are up to the task. And where they are not up to the task, we need to exercise our mandate and our franchise to say, let's demand better and look for that somewhere else. So it's not the system, it's the type of people, unfortunately, that are being drafted into these positions whom we have to look seriously at and interrogate them rigorously to make sure that they are fit for purpose.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, thank you so much, Reverend Hewitt. It's always so inspiring to speak with you, and I want to say to you publicly that we miss those articles. I know when you do them, I tell you, that pen of yours can cause some changes in this country, and we need you, sir. The opposition, you're part of the opposition. You're a Barbadian. And so we're giving you a charge, the loyal opposition. We're not a political party, but we're giving you a charge, sir. Pick up that pen again and continue to do what you do. This warms my heart, and what it has done for me, it has affirmed what has come in our hearts to do. Re the persons who have died, because even today I got criticism for it, but hearing you tonight touched my heart and affirms what we are going to do on Sunday at 5:30 at Hastings Rock. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marcia. And I want to commend you and all of your viewers for the excellent work that you all are doing in terms of accountability, and to assure you that while I would love to be with you on Sunday in person, I will definitely be there in spirit. So God bless you all, and I say good night or good morning from London. Bye-bye.
I know you're tired, so and don't be a stranger. I'll be calling on you again, sir. Thank you so much. God bless you, and keep up the godly work. Godly work. Thank you. God bless. Bye-bye. Oh my gosh, wasn't that awesome? Wasn't that awesome? I tell you. And this is what our religious bodies, this is what those who say they name the name of God. This is a kind of direction and a kind of instruction that is necessary. So necessary. And he has brought a lot of clarity to me, confirmed a lot for me of what, as I said, I've been hearing from the guys on the street. I'm hearing from the Reverend tonight, and I believe that as we work together, we're going to get a lot accomplished as we work together. All of us in the citizenry, every one of us working together.